recording. All right. The introductory lecture is going to center on the field of international human resource management. And by the end of the lecture, students are expected to have an appreciation of the key concepts that take a center stage in the field of international human resource management, including what, first and foremost, international HRM is all about. We will also take the time to appreciate concepts such as headquarters, subsidiaries, host country nationals, home country nationals or parent country nationals, and third country nationals. And these are the categories of employees that are always found working in a multinational enterprise. So we will also look at the objectives that international human resource management seeks to achieve. Beside the objectives, we will also tackle the challenges that international HR practitioners face whenever they are managing the well-being of employees in a multinational enterprises. An attempt will also be made to compare and contrast domestic HRM and international HRM. And we will finally end the lectures by tackling the international orientations which inform how multinational enterprises may decide to manage their workforce. And these include either adopting an heterocentric orientation, a regiocentric, a polycentric, and finally, a geocentric orientation. All right. So, in recent times, it is evident that the trade barriers which subsist between nations or across the globe is almost disappeared. For this reason, the communication links that help countries or individuals across countries to embark on trade have become faster and cheaper. And this is due to technological advancements and the issue that we have now endorsed or accepted as globalization. So these communication lanes, which are said to have become faster and cheaper, means that the tastes and preferences of customers are now converging. In other words, I may be in Ghana now, but I may aspire to have the best of clothes that are manufactured in UK. And if I have the means and technology, I'll be able to procure it without any form of difficulty. In the same vein, I may be in Ghana operating my firm, but a lot of customers may be subscribing to my goods and services outside the boundaries of Ghana. So they may be purchasing it from India, China, UK, or the United States of America. That is, if I'm able to integrate some level of digitization and technology into my business operations. So that is what we mean by trade barriers between nations almost disappearing. It is no more an excuse to say that I am located in a particular part of the world that is isolated totally from the rest of the world. Once you are able to adopt the right technology and means, all these barriers will become a thing of the past. And that is why we say the world has now become a global village. In this pace of globalization, the markets for goods and services have also now become global. So when we are producing goods and services, we move beyond the myopic perception that it is for indigenes of only a single country. Rather, we think global and believe that even though we may be operating in a small corner of a particular country, at the end of the day, we expect individuals that are beyond our borders to still patronize it. For that reason, there has been an increment in what we call cross-border investment. So individuals that identify that the products a firm is churning out may be more lucrative, may decide to invest in such products or corporations without necessarily finding themselves in that country. So that is what we construe as cross-border investment. So the investors may be found in a different country altogether, but they may perceive that by pumping their money into a particular business in a different geographical location, they can make reasonable profit out of it. There is also a proliferation of cross-border mergers and acquisitions. So what we mean by cross-border mergers and acquisition is that firms are now beginning to realize that in order for them to have competitive advantage in regions where they are operating, it may be more important for them to partner with other firms without necessarily engaging in cutting-throat competition. So merging here will mean that the two or more firms will sit down, formulate a policy that best serves their interests. Acquisition, on the other hand, may mean that a flourishing firm may decide to buy out another firm that may perhaps be growing up in a different country, so that this new firm that has been acquired will become its front in terms of churning out its goods and services. And all these have become possible as a result of trade barriers between nations disappearing. And it is also attributable to technology, digitization, and the world becoming a global village. Joint ventures are also springing up. Alliances are also continuing to increase. So all these issues that are possible now as a result of globalization, technology, and digitization will mean you can no longer use the HR policies and practices that were designed for managing domestic workforce in such context. Rather, it means you have to elevate the HR policies and practices by adapting a new one that will address the needs and the challenges that confront the individuals or the human resources that work across these varied bodies. So thousands of firms and millions of people work outside their country of origin, and millions of people also work at home for foreign-owned companies. And if all these are under the umbrella of a single firm. It means that you cannot use the domestic HR policy and practices to get the best results out of them. Rather, you will need to have an HR policy and practices that has the room to accommodate the cultural issues, economic issues, political issues, and technological issues that comes with operating in such a global landscape. And what this means is that there is no way for anyone or any business to escape from constant global pressures. What then is international human resource management? And as I indicated earlier on, anytime you see IHRM, I am essentially referring to international human resource management. A number of definitions have been submitted to explain in simple parlance what the field of international HRM is all about. And we are going to consider some of them. So according to Briscoe, Schuler, and Claus, international HRM is the study and the application of all human resource management activities as they impact the process of managing human resources in enterprises in the global environment. Armstrong also defines international HRM as the process of managing people across international boundaries by multinational companies. So irrespective of how you look at it, international human resource management entails the process of managing human resources in an international context. So what then is entailed in managing human resources in an international context? It involves the planning, that is the human resource planning, the selection, the training, and the development of employees in multinational companies to ensure effective and efficient management across different countries. So essentially, I'm trying to summarize it using the key HR practices. In the same vein, international human resource management encompasses a broad range of activities. And some of these activities include global talent management. Global talent management. And this global talent management, which we will have a full lecture on, involves the attempt that is made by HR professionals of multinational enterprises to identify, recruit, and retain talent that can operate effectively in diverse cultural settings. Over here, it is important to place emphasis on the effectiveness of these talents to operate effectively in diverse cultural settings, because when you are working in a multinational enterprise, you are not confined to a single country. Your inputs and outcomes may have serious repercussions to your counterparts that are found in other different cultural settings. So if you come across to be someone that is ethnocentric or someone that is insensitive to the cultural background of your counterparts, then you are always going to create problem at the workplace, because within the office that you may be operating, to your left may be a Chinese, to your right may be an Indian, and you may also have individuals coming from UK or United States, all of which may be working assiduously to help a firm succeed. So much emphasis is on individuals that can operate effectively in diverse cultural settings when it comes to global talent management. So if you do not have the ability to be culturally sensitive to your peers or counterparts, then you are not cut out for such an international environment. International HRM also encompasses cross-cultural training. As I indicated earlier on, because individuals that are working in multinational enterprises tend to work with others that originate from different cultural backgrounds. Emphasis on cultural sensitivity cannot be compromised. So cross-cultural training as a component of international HRM seeks to provide training to the employees in the multinational enterprise to enhance their cultural awareness and ability to work in different cultural environments. And that is why it is important for you to prepare individuals that may be going on an international assignment so that even though they may be working in a different cultural environment, the extent to which they experience cultural shocks will reduce. And don't forget, some of these cultural shocks may take forever for them to recover. So the level of preparedness you grant them will also assist them to hit the ground running when they go on some of these international assignments. Another component of international HRM, which can be derived from these definitions, is that it involves expatriate management. So managing the relocation, compensation, career development of employees assigned to work in a foreign subsidiary falls within the purview of international HRM, particularly international HR professionals. And this may have nothing to do with a firm that's a domestic firm that is practicing domestic HR, because they may have nothing to do with relocating employee from one subsidiary to the other or from one country to the other. So why do you need to be thinking about some of these issues? By the way, when I say subsidiary, do you understand what it means? Let me first clarify before it is too late. When I say a subsidiary country, do you understand what it means? Are you all there?
Yes, sir.
So when I say a
Yes, sir.
subsidiary country, do you understand what it means? Or a subsidiary
So it
company?
means countries where they have their branches.
Exactly. So anytime I use subsidiary, I'm referring to the other branches of the firm that are located in different companies, different countries. But the right terminology which I expect you to be using onward is subsidiaries and not branches. In the strict sense of it, we use branches for parts of an organization that are found within the same country. So you can say branch of Stanchat is located in, let's say, Takoradi, or they have a branch within Takoradi. You can say they have a branch in Market Circle, they have a branch in airports, they have a branch in, Harbour, and so on and so forth. But multinational enterprises have subsidiaries. Okay. Other components of international HR include compensation and benefits. And this include how compensation packages are designed so that they are competitive and compliant with local laws and norms in various countries. So when we say it has to be competitive, when you do salary benchmarking, or if you compare how much your firm is paying to that of your competitors, it should be substantial. It should be something that can attract and win talented people that aspire to make it in life to work for you. In the same vein, such packages should also be compliant, and that is very much important. It should be compliant with local laws and norms in various countries, because the labor law and the minimum wage may be dictating certain do's and don'ts as you move from one country to the other. So how do you navigate around these lines without compromising on the standard that you aspire to achieve as far as the practice of HRM is concerned? This also falls within the purview of international HRM. It also covers compliance with international labor laws. So although Ghana may be having its own labor law, on the international theft, there are labor laws that these multinational enterprises are expected to comply with, and these become clear as they move from one country to the other. So this compliance with international labor laws ensures that HR practices comply with labor laws and regulations of host countries, and the laws that the policies and programs that may also be stipulated by international bodies such as ILO, International Labour Organization. Okay, so ILO may be having clauses on the number of days employees are expected to go on leave, the issue about work-life balance, issue about paying them decent salaries. So most of the domestic labor law clauses and conventions are usually derived from some of these international labor law procedures, including that of ILO. It also encompasses performance management, which entails developing performance appraisal systems that takes into account the diverse cultural and economic environments of different countries. In fact, even though Africans are perceived by Westerners to be the same, you realize that the work ethic and work attitude of Ghanaians may be different from that of South Africans. For instance, our orientation towards time. When we say we are starting a meeting or work is starting at exactly 7 o'clock, do we mean 7 on the dot, or we mean about 30 minutes past 7? Okay, research will suggest that because of the different orientations we have towards some of these work ethics and work attitude, it also influences how our performance is appraised, such that a typical Westerner may treat an employee that show up at work 30 minutes late as having it into productive hours. But that may be treated as a trivial issue by a supervisor that find him or herself in a non-Western African context. So the challenge here is that if you are an HR practicing in a multinational enterprise and you are confronted with some of these issues, how do you manage it? Do you need to consider the cultural nuances that is influencing how such behavior or misdemeanor should be treated? Or you should use the standard way of appraising such outcomes. So those are some of the things we look at when we get to performance management in international context. Then there is also the issue of employee relations, which is very much important because HR in multinational enterprises will be managing relationship between employees and organizations, and they will also be considering different labor relation systems in varied countries, which becomes more complicated. Then last but not the least is that they will also be handling strategic HR planning issues to ensure that they are able to align HR strategies with the global business strategy of the multinational enterprise in order to support their international expansion and operation. Which means that if a multinational enterprise has a subsidiary in Ghana, the Ghanaian subsidiary cannot decide to be doing things as it fits Ghana alone. Rather, it must have strategies, particularly the HR department must have strategies that will also feed into the global agenda of the multinational enterprise. And this must mutually support the agenda and operations of the firm. So when we talk about international HRM, it entails all the things that I have touched on so far. If you have any question at this moment, I'll pause for you to ask. Any question? All right, if there are no questions, then let's make progress. So, international human resource management employees. Research suggests that there currently exists 3 main types of employees that fall under the practice of international human resource management. And these include parent country nationals, also known as home country nationals. It also includes host country nationals. And lastly, it also entails third country nationals. So we are going to take them in turns. And please, if you are abbreviating them, pay keen attention to how the acronym is arranged, because if you alter the arrangement, you are referring to something else altogether. So parent country nationals is PCN. If you say country parent nationals, I'm sorry, you are referring to something which is totally different from what we are interested in. If you say national country host or country national host, it's totally different from host country nationals. And if you also say country national third or whatever, you are saying a totally different thing altogether. So pay keen attention to these concepts and know what they entail. Firstly, parent country nationals. It is also known as home country nationals. These are essentially the employees or the staff which are working in a multinational enterprise that originate from the headquarters, the country where the headquarters is found. So they are the employees from the country in which the organization's headquarters is based. Employees that are found in the country where the organization's headquarters is based. So a typical example is that hello, are you all there?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
A typical example
Yes,
of a
sir.
parent country national is So where is the headquarters of MTN found? The headquarters of MTN, where is it found?
South Africa.
Very good. All the South Africans that are working for MTN, whether in South Africa or as expatriates working for MTN in Ghana, can be construed as parent country nationals. And the reason is that they are the employees that come from the country where MTN or the multinational enterprise has its headquarters located. And I believe this is very clear and straight to the point, the first point. So what then is host country nationals? Host country nationals. These are workers or employees that hail from the country in which the subsidiary is based. An example is that Ghanaians that are working for MTN in Ghana can be characterized as host country nationals because Ghana is just a country hosting a subsidiary of MTN. But if a South African is working for MTN in Ghana, how will we call that South African? Did you get my question?
So say he
Please,
will be
come again,
called
sir.
parent country national.
Very good. Parent country national. Good. So we are building it gradually. Now, a third country national is also a type of employee that are likely to be found in a multinational enterprise. These are workers whose nationality is different from where the headquarters is located or where the subsidiary firms are also found. So third country nationals typically are coming from jurisdictions that are different from the location where the headquarters is sited. And such location is also different from the region where the subsidiary firm is found. So a typical example is that an Australian, okay, for MTN, a Nigerian working for MTN Ghana can typically be characterized as a third country national because these Nigerians, neither do they come from Ghana, nor do they come from South Africa. They are coming from a country that is outside the place where they are currently working. That is where the subsidiary is found. And that country is also different from where the parent country, sorry, where the headquarters is located. Is the third country nationals explanation clear?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we are building it gradually. Please take keen note of these concepts and explanations because when in the course of my presentation, I may be making reference to some of these things. So every context that I use it, I'm not going to use it in a loose fashion or just for the fun of it. It has meaning. So the moment you put parent country national in place of a third country national, it has different implications altogether. All right. Now, what are the objectives of international human resource management? International human resource management has a number of objectives. And these include the idea that it strives to enhance global competitiveness of the multinational enterprise. And it does this by attracting and retaining talented staff into the multinational enterprise. You all agree with me that the current competition that firms are facing in the global economy is cutting throat. Every firm wants to outperform its rivals. So how then do you maintain your superiority or global dominance? It is only true by pursuing competitive advantage, which means that as a firm, you must have human resources and other non-human resources that your competitors may struggle to also have in place. So when it comes to the human resources, it is important for you to be selective, attract individuals that have distinctive capabilities that are always coming forth to bring something new on the table. And these new things they are bringing onto the table should be able to push you to outperform your rival. So that is why we say it seeks to achieve or enhance global competitiveness by attracting and retaining talented staff into the multinational enterprises. It also seeks to generate awareness of cross-cultural sensibility among managers globally and hire staff across geographical boundaries. Now, this is quite detailed or nuanced in the sense that managing cross-cultural diversity may require the HR manager to foster a diverse and an inclusive work environment that respects and leverage cultural differences. What this means is that the cultural environment within which these multinational enterprises will be operating should be able to accommodate individual differences as far as their cultural background is concerned. It should be devoid of ethnocentrism, whereby the cultural tastes and preferences of one country will be superimposed upon that of other individuals that are originating from different countries. And this becomes clearer whenever there is a clash of cultures between the parent country and the subsidiary countries. So international HRM has an objective to foster a diverse and an inclusive environment that will respect, and instead of entrenching ethnocentrism, rather it seeks to leverage cultural differences to the best advantage of the multinational enterprise. Now, still on managing cultural diversity, it also has the objective to provide cross-cultural training to enhance employees' cultural awareness and competency. So that is where the issue of sensitizing the employees about the need to be accommodative and embracive of individuals that have opinions inseparable from their cultural orientation. So you essentially shouldn't be ethnocentric, and much of the emphasis in in managing cultural diversity will come up over there. So I have already tackled the issue of culture and sensitivity to host country. Then legal and regulatory compliance. So international HRM has an objective to comply with the labor laws, tax regulations, employment standards in the various countries where it will be operating. So it becomes imperative that there is the development of policies and practices that adhere to both local and international regulations. And there is also the need for you to converge the two, because sometimes the local labor laws may be saying one thing, or the local legal arrangements may be dictate one thing, but international wise, it may be contravening certain clauses. And that is where the ingenuity of the international HR comes to bear, how to navigate across it. And I must admit, it's not an easy task. It is easier said than done. But at the end of the day, there should be a way to forge ahead. It also strives to create a local appeal for FM goods and services without compromising on the global identity and quality. In other words, international HRM seeks to ensure that the multinational enterprise thinks locally, but acts globally. Thinks locally, but acts globally. So which means that when it comes to the goods and services that are churned out to the general public or the customers, the tastes and preferences in the African sub-region may be different from that of the Asian sub-region or the European continents. And instead of these differences pushing us out of business, it must rather help us to diversify and capitalize on it. Mind you, the variations in appeal for goods and services that may deviate from the global direction of the firm may have religious and cultural undertones. So if you go to India, for instance, they revere cattle or cow. In fact, it is perceived over there to be a god. So it will be a taboo for you to set up a restaurant and say you are going to serve beef. Okay? If you are a firm that is trying to cut into such countries or terrains, then you have to be able to replace the beef with something else that is also having a local appeal over there. But that does not mean that you'll be compromising on the standardization with which you serve your customers, or with which you, in terms of the quality of your products. And that is why we mean that it seeks to create a local appeal for a firm's goods and services without compromising upon their global identity and quality. So everywhere you go will dictate on the modifications you bring on board. And to have a better understanding and appreciation of how detailed these modifications must be, you will need to have on board individuals that are originating from such cultural contexts. All right. Let me see if I've left anything out. Okay, so I think we are good to go. Now, the challenges, the challenges that are faced in the practice of HRM in multinational enterprises. So at this point, we are going to look at the challenges that HR practitioners face when they are working in multinational enterprises. And anytime you see MNE, it stands for multinational enterprises. I may be interchanging it with MNC, which is multinational company. Now, the DAE here is an acronym for these first three bullets we are going to go through. So the D is developing a global mindset. A is aligning your core HR processes and activities, and the E is enhancing global competencies and capabilities. By challenges, we are going to look at the constraints or the hurdles, or if you like, pitfalls that international HR practitioners face whenever they try to roll out HR policies and practices for multinational enterprises. And the first is that developing a global mindset inside the HR function, particularly awareness and understanding of the new global competitive environment and the impact it has on management of people worldwide, is not a child's play. The global HR challenge here will consist of how to effectively attract, engage, and retain the thousands of multinational enterprise employees in many different countries to achieve the strategic imperatives of the firm. Now, this not only include engaging employees in different countries of the multinational enterprise, but also the role and importance of global mobile employees, such as expatriates, impatriates, repatriates, short-term international assignees, and what have you. So we are saying here, the bottom line in this particular point is that the HR may have the good interest of the organization at heart by aspiring to attract and retain talented workforce into the enterprise. But he is doing this from varied countries. And these countries have their own issues and challenges. Different economies, different level of technology, different level of educational system, different cultures. And when you put all these individuals together and you attempt to manage them, as far as their talent is concerned, it becomes more complex because what may be perceived as the norm in one cultural context may be a taboo in another cultural context. Let me give you a typical example. In the Western world, in fact, in Ghana now, it will not be out of place to allow a female employee to occupy a CEO position or a directorship position in an organization. It will not be out of the norm. But in other cultural contexts, such portfolios are the reserve of males. So if you go to the Asian context, such as India, if you go to the Arabian context, such as Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and those Islamic nations, patriarchy is the order of the day. And when I say patriarchy, I mean men are perceived to occupy, men are expected to occupy powerful positions in society. And such patriarchal societies will not find it welcoming at all when you decide to, in your organizational structure, create room for females to occupy higher positions. So the talent may be there, all right, but the culture or the religion of such people may not entertain such gestures. And that will be a Herculean hurdle for the HR manager to overcome, especially if that is the candidate you perceive as more suitable to help drive the fortunes of the company in that particular country. The second one is aligning core HR processes and activities with the new requirements of competing globally while simultaneously responding to local issues and requirements. Simply put, international HRM seeks to make sure that the multinational enterprise thinks globally but acts locally. So Coca-Cola, for instance, may be having some of its beverages going global, but when they get to Ghana, the way they brand the beverage may be different from how it may be branded in the United Kingdom or United States. And this is because in our cultural context, when you are buying products and you identify that you can, and you can identify with the product. What I mean by identify with the product is that you remember at some point in time, they will, the branding of Coca-Cola had our local names embedded on it. So you can see share Coke with Abena, share Coke with Kwesi, share Coke with Kojo, and so on and so forth. That may have meaning and connection in Ghana. But when you go to a neighboring country like Nigeria, and that is how you are marketing your Coca-Cola beverage, it may not make sense over there. This means that in an attempt to think global but act local, HRM in multinational enterprises must have in place the talents that can hone and nurture local issues and package it in such a way that it will equally not deviate from the standard that is being set by headquarters. And as I indicated earlier on, it is easier said than done, because sometimes you may be having a compelling opinion about how some of these trade can be conducted. But because you find yourself in a subsidiary company and the international orientation of the multinational enterprise supersedes some of these opinions, which means you must get the green light from headquarters before you embark on it, it becomes very much complicated to handle. And that is where the challenge lies. Enhancing global competencies and capabilities within the HR function. So international HRM seeks to elevate the competencies and capabilities of human resources over and above what's maintained in domestic HRM. And the reason is that these human resources will be operating in an environment that is more globalized, in an environment that has varied cultures clashing and colliding. So as much as possible, the capabilities and competencies that these human resources possess must be able to navigate across this global terrain. And that is why it becomes quite difficult for them to maintain, because at any point in time, the mindset of an international HR operator is that you are empowering individuals to work in a global economy, not just in an obscured component of the world. And whatever competencies that your workforce possess should be able to stand the test of time and survive when it is transferred, when such people are transferred to other countries, they should be able to flourish. Then there is also the issue of different stages of technological advancement. So sometimes the pace of technology at the parent country may be far advanced, but when you move to the subsidiary countries, they may still be struggling or grappling with internet connectivity issues, or the technology that you may require to interact with your counterparts in different countries may not even be available. And that may mean that when it comes to, for instance, monitoring the performance of your individuals that are on an assignment over there, it may be quite challenging. So the level of technology that is advanced across the countries may also pose great level of challenge to the practice of international HR. Then there is also the issue of different values and attitude. So as I indicated, in Ghana, our attitude towards time, achievement, and risk-taking is totally different from that of our counterparts in the Western context, such as Europe and America. So typically Ghana, if you are organizing a program and you say, we are starting at 9 a.m., you realize people will be showing up 30 minutes after 9, sometimes an hour after 9. And the surprising thing is that most people will not find any problem with such an attitude because it has more or less become part and parcel of our culture. And if you are if you are a Ghanaian, you may not have the nerve to even complain because it is something that you are used to. But if you are alien to this work attitude or work orientation of Ghanaians, then it may come across as something that is weird. And that is why when people travel from Ghana to other contexts and they find that 9 o'clock means 9 on the dot and not any few minutes past that time, then cultural shock starts setting in. So the same can be said about our level of achievement, risk-taking. Whereas some countries and their cultural context may be risk-aversive. Others may be more risk-takers. So typically, a scenario that may trigger an African or a Ghanaian to run from the scene, and non-African, such as an American or a European, may be getting closer to poke the situation to see what will happen. So it's more or less like confronting something that may be quite scary. You seldomly not find an African or someone who is risk aversive trying to poke a lion or an alligator to see what will happen. But someone that has a risk-taking attitude or behavior will have nothing wrong with it when it comes to some of these attitudes. So that is it. And this, when the challenge is that when you are managing individuals from different cultural contexts, ultimately their values and attitude will also be influencing how they behave in the multinational enterprise. So as an HR manager, how do you manage and navigate these varied values and attitudes without coming across as being ethnocentric to one counterpart at the expense of the other? That is where the issue lies. Now, still on the values and attitudinal management, a lot can be said about cultural differences as far as international HRM is concerned. Now, the challenge here is that the international HR will be managing a diverse workforce with varied cultural background, values, and work practices. And he must also ensure effective cross-cultural communication and understanding to minimize misunderstanding and conflicts. So you are dealing with individuals that have different values, cultural orientations. So certain gestures that may be perceived as the norm in your culture may be perceived as a taboo in another cultural context. So how do you ensure that there is no miscommunication or misunderstanding? Or as much as possible, how do you minimize some of these things? It is a huge challenge to the international HR because the management of some of these things does not come with ease. So in Ghana, you will be characterized as very much disrespectful. In a classroom situation, for instance, if you raise your left hand to ask a question, how do you expect your lecturer and your colleagues to perceive you in Ghana? But that is something that will be welcomed in a Western cultural context. Because the meaning we attach to the left hand over here, culturally, is totally different from how they also do it. The same can be said about using first names to call your superiors. Those of you that are working, or let's take academia. In Ghana, if someone is a doctor or a professor, and the person is teaching you, and you mistakenly call the person Mr., if you don't take care, you are going to get an F in the class simply because of the values that we attach to names. In other words, calling the person professor or a doctor connotes that the person is very much powerful. So the moment you detach those titles from the names, then you have reduced the power and authority of the person. That is how it is construed in our cultural context. But in a Western cultural context, so for instance, if you go to Norway, in fact, in all the classes that I take over there, my lecturers were rather reminding me to call them by their first names because they saw us as colleagues, and there was no need for us to be calling them professor or doctor. In fact, it took quite some time for some of us to become used to that. So the bottom line here is that at what point will such gestures be construed as the norm, and for that matter, may not lead to misunderstanding or conflicts? And at which other points may it also be characterized as coming across as disrespectful? That is a huge challenge which the international HR practitioners, which are managing workforce across varied cultural contexts, needs to navigate. On performance management, there is a challenge here, and this is so because it involves the implementation of performance appraisal systems that accommodates diverse cultural perspectives on evaluations and feedback. So when, I'm sure you are all familiar with what you mean by performance appraisal, you are essentially comparing the key performance index that were set for employees against their actual performance to see whether there is a variation in their performance. And if there is a variation, you come in to assist them to improve upon it. Now, what constitutes a good performance according to research is not easily defined as you move from one cultural context to the other. In fact, in collectivistic cultural context, so when I say collectivistic cultural context, it means countries that are filled with cultures that embrace togetherness, that embrace the unison of the team or the group performance over the outcome of individuals. So Ghana, a typical example is that those of you that are familiar with Nobwa in our villages, what they usually do is that they'll come together, help one individual to till his land, plant his farm produce. At least the person will be assisted by the rest of the farmers in that community to farm his land. And then they'll move to other individuals that are part of the team. So that is what they call Nobwa. It is done in team fashion. And that is one of our cultural orientation, which means that when you are managing performance or you are appraising performance of individuals in such cultural contexts, you should not downplay the power of team members. If you focus on the output of individuals, you may end up setting the individual that will outperform the others in the team against the rest of the team members. In other words, whenever you detach individuals or you single them out and characterize them as having superior performance over and above their peers, it will depersonalize the individual in question, and it will also bring conflict among them. So performance appraisal in collectivistic contexts such as Ghana needs to be mindful and wary of team performance as against individual performance. And the reason is that the self-development and self-construct of individuals in this collectivistic cultural contest is contingent on their teams or the group that they belong in. So if their group is doing well, it gives them high self-esteem, and it also mirrors that they are also doing well as individuals. But if their team is not doing well, then it also gives them low self-esteem that as individuals, they are not doing well or pulling their lot to help their team to flourish. And typical example is our extended family system. So growing up, you may be corrected or reprimanded by your aunties and your uncles, and not necessarily by your parents. And the reason is that if you are not corrected to put up a good behavior and you start going wayward, that will be a bad reflection on your extended family, not only on your nuclear family. So your success or failure as an individual in such collectivistic cultural contexts, such as Ghana, is dependent on the group that you find yourself in. Now, let's bring this to the world of work. When it comes to performance appraisal, the same cultural issues have an undertone. So research suggests that in collectivistic contexts such as Ghana, when you are appraising employees, the degree to which the supervisor will give higher ratings to all the team members is high, particularly if those team members belong to they are the same religiosity with them or ethnicity, or they are family members. And the suggestion is that if you do not give favorable ratings to such people, it is a bad reflection on the orientation where you have similarity with such people. So that is how performance management becomes complicated. At what point in time will you be adhering to the cultural perspectives of the local constituents? And at what point will you also be adhering to the standardization that has been set by the headquarters? Being mindful of the cultural issues that may have an undertone. The role of religiosity, so sacred objects, prayers, taboos, holidays, and so on and so forth. So religiosity, an example is like the Indian example I gave. as you move from one country to the other, you are confronted with religious issues that may be treated as sacred objects. Even in Ghana, we have our totems. Those of you that are familiar with Nton, them kind of friends say Akraboano. Those totems are treated as sacred objects. So it is expected that if you are originating from that ethnic line, then you have to treat such objects as sacred. But elevating the discourse to multinational enterprises and dealing at the country level, it is important to be mindful about the religious background and religious orientations of the country and the people that you will be managing. This is because compromising some of these religious dictates may connote a sign of disregard for their revered objects, and that may not utter well if you find yourself in the minority. So I am familiar with a case wherein a particular employee that was on an international assignment in India was nearly killed because he went to a part of India that were predominantly treating cattle as a god. And he was trying to buy beef in their supermarket. So the moment he communicated his intentions, they also thought that he was making mockery of their god. And they did not treat it lightly. It was later on that some people interjected and said, there is someone who is not used to their culture, and so they should temper justice with mercy. This means that to get the best outcome from some of these scenarios, it is important that prior to sending them on the international assignment, you have to give them what we call pre-departure orientation. And that will nurture them about some of the expectations, the do's and don'ts over there. And when they also get into the country, you offer them what we call post-departure orientation to align some of the things that they learned prior to their journey with the realities on the ground. Educational level attainment. So educational level may also be varied as you move from one country to the other. And sometimes your search for a particular talent may not be available. In Ghana, those in the oil and gas industry will attest to the fact that sometimes the oil and gas firms will be looking for people with engineering background in their field, but our graduates usually specialize in the managerial and the soft sciences that are attached to oil and gas, instead of doing oceanography, oil and gas engineering, and the mechanical component. So if you find yourself in a country where the educational level attained and the focus of the educational constituents is way apart from what you intend to flourish over there, then you will struggle. But of course, the remedy is that you may have to look beyond that country. Still on the challenges facing the field of HRM, there is also the issue about deployment. So getting the right mix of skills in the organization, regardless of your geographical location, is also a huge challenge. Talent identification and development, that is identifying capable people who will be able to function effectively, is also another challenge, because you are not dealing with a single country. You are supposed to look beyond the country of origin and get the best talents, irrespective of their geographical location, to come and work for you. And that may require a lot of time, resources, and investments to get the best outcome. Then there is also the issue of barrier to women in international HRM. And as I indicated, certain cultural contexts and countries have norms and expectations that they may want multinational enterprises to comply with. And this may mean that the style of dressing of men should be different from that of women. So if it's the norm for individuals in the multinational enterprise to always be found in fancy suits and tie, that may not maintain when you go to these some of these Arab nations, because over there it may be required for the women to be wearing their hijab all the time. In fact, in some of these Arabian countries, it is not even allowed for women to be driving. So how do you navigate some of these barriers to women as you manage your workforce in a multinational enterprise? Then there is issue of language barrier, the one that is spoken, written, and body language. So you must be on top of issues when it comes to, for instance, body language, so that you do not put up a gesture that miscommunicates your intention. So in certain cultural contexts, when you sit down and cross your leg, opposite, you cross your leg in front of the opposite sex, it connotes that you are initiating that you want to have a sexual intercourse with them. So if you are sitting in front of an Indian, one caste of the Indian community construe that gesture or that body language that you want to have sex into. If cross your legs, they may characterize you as being sexually pervasive or offensive. Meanwhile, you may just be relaxing your legs, or it may be your way of showing you are on top of issues, your level of confidence. But unfortunately, that body language alone has a different connotation or interpretation as you move from one cultural context to the other. In the same vein, as I indicated earlier on, the use of left hand in offering directions, or when you are speaking with powerful people in society in Ghana, can be construed as a bad manner because of our culture. But that may be an acceptable mode of communication with a Westerner. So the bottom line here is that you need to be mindful about some of these language demarcations and become sensitive to them, so that when you are dealing with cultural contexts that do not welcome them, then you refrain from such activities. So different labor laws. There is the need for multinational enterprises to comply with not only local laws, but international regulations as well. So how do they navigate different labor laws, tax regulations, employment standards in various countries? And how do they also ensure compliance with local legal requirements whilst maintaining consistent HR policies across the organizations? It's not a child's play, so it is a challenge that they have to grapple with. The issue of compensation and benefits. Multinational enterprises need to design compensation structures that are competitive and fair across different countries. But of course, they also have to be mindful that these countries have different economics, different tax systems. So they have to calibrate it accordingly. How do they address disparities in cost of living, taxation, social security system, and all that, so that the well-being of employees is not jeopardized. It is a huge hurdle for them to grapple with. Different economic and political climates. So managing HR operations in regions with economic or political instability can be quite disturbing. If you are functioning operating in an economy that is always volatile, prices of goods and services keeps fluctuating, it will be very much difficult to maintain a decent standard of living for a workforce. And of course, if they are not also having decent standard of living, it can jeopardize their psyche or psychology and their contribution to organizational success. So this will not alter well for the multinational enterprise, and it becomes a hurdle for the HR practitioner to jump over. For that reason, there's the need for them to develop contingent plans to address potential disruptions in business operations that may be traced to economic or political instability. So if the region is such that it is fraught with rampant coup d'etats, then it's not an ideal place to operate for a longer period of time. You must aspire or seek for an environment that is politically stable so that in your operations, you can also make some profit. At this point, I will pause for questions. If you have any questions, let me know. Are there any questions?
No, sir. So, yeah.
All right. We are going to look at the differences between international HRM and domestic HRM. As I indicated in my introductory remarks on the definition of international HRM, it simply borders on the management of human resources in an international context. So we are talking about in a multinational enterprise. Domestic HRM rather focuses in a single country. So it focuses on the management of human resources in a single country. But of course, within that country, the workforce may be scattered across the varied regions that are found in that country. So comparatively, international HRM has more HR functions and activities. For example, the management of international assignees may fall within the purview of international HRM. That is when people are going on international assignments. And this will require the management of assignee issues such as the foreign taxes that they will be paying on their compensation and benefits. Working their visas for them to travel. Sometimes they may have to travel with their family and other significant others. And you may also have to assist them with international relocation, that is moving from one international assignment to the other. And that's make it more elaborate as far as the HR functions is concerned. There is also a broader expertise and perspective when it comes to international HRM as compared to domestic HRM. And this includes knowledge about foreign countries. So as an international HR, you must have knowledge about all the foreign countries where you have subsidiaries. And this will put you in a great position to prepare your workforce when they are going on an expatriate program. Okay. You must also be familiar with their employment laws so that you do not end up violating them and paying penalties that can not only affect your international reputation, but you may sometimes have to pay damages that may cut into millions. You need to be familiar with their cultural differences, which may not be the case in domestic HRM, because in domestic HRM, you are dealing with individuals that have commonalities with their cultural background. Now, international HRM is more involving in people's lives. So international HR, as of Ofefe Nemamupa, he is very much integrated into the lives of his workforce. And this may take turns when the firm relocates employees and their families from one country to another. It is important for them to be involved in it because the firm is going to be responsible for the well-being of the international assignee as well as his family. So if you are going with your family members and you have children, that means that they must be aware of the profession of your spouse, the job that they were doing, and they must also strive to get a similar job for them when they go with the international assignment on the assignment. In the same vein, if they are not able to get a job for the spouse over there, they must have some amount of compensation for them to live a decent life over there. Same can be said about the wives or children of the person going on the assignment. If they are going with their children, that means that they must get an international school or at least get an educational system that the children can easily integrate into. Because if they are not able to resolve all those familial issues relating to their spouse and the children, the person is likely to fail on the assignment. He is now going to be torn between hitting the ground running and also finding a decent life for his family members to integrate into. So whether the family members are being left behind or they are being taken on the assignment, international HRM becomes involved in it so that there wouldn't be any conflicts originating from that lines, which may now despair the functioning of the person on the international assignment. International HR also deals with and manage a much wider mix of employees. So as I said earlier on, it may include host country nationals, home country nationals, and then third country nationals. And this adds another layer of complexity to the management task of the international HR, because we're dealing with cultures that may not overlap, some may be clashing. And if you don't take care, you may be indulging in ethnocentrism, which can result in conflicts and misunderstanding. So that makes it more complicated. International HRM also is more filled with external factors and influences, such as dealing with issues that stem from multiple governments, cultures, currencies, and languages. So I was talking about different labor law, different taxation system, different language, currencies, and all that. But in a domestic HRM, it is a single country we are talking about. So the labor law is common, The same culture is there. The language and currency is also what the same. Now, the serious difference is that international HRM involves the taking of greater level of risk. And this risk also comes forth with greater exposure to problems and difficulties that may expose the firm to potential liabilities for making mistakes in HR decisions. So there could be a political pressure to hire or give concession to certain key people, but this may contravene your standards that have been created as a firm. There could also be early repatriation from a foreign assignment because the individual that was sent or the expatriate was not succeeding as expected. So there is much high level of risk when it comes to international HRM management. So yeah, these are some of the differences. Altogether, they can be summarized this way. Domestic HRM occurs at the national or the country level, whereas international HRM is at the international level, involving multiple countries. Now, domestic HRM is concerned with managing employees belonging to a single nation, whilst international HRM manage employees belonging to multiple nations. So it goes on and on. When you go, you take your time and look at these things. International orientations. When I was taking you through the course outline, I indicated that the strategy that is pursued by a multinational enterprise with respect to how it manages its workforce is influenced by the orientation that they align with. These orientations are philosophies or theories that the firm subscribes to. And it is believed that when they adhere to the philosophy of that orientation, they will be able to achieve enviable results. For that reason, one aspect of international strategy that has been relatively well studied involves international orientations of senior executives, usually referred to in terms proposed by Perlmutter as ethnocentric, polycentric, regiocentric, and geocentric. So when you are asked about the international orientations which may be adopted by multinational enterprises to manage their human resources, they are these four terminologies: ethnocentrism or ethnocentric, polycentrism, or if you like, polycentric, regiocentrism, or if you like, regiocentric, and finally, geocentrism or geocentric. So we are going to take them in turns. But at the background, the central strategic issue in a firm's orientation is the degree of domination of the multinational enterprise's headquarters over the subsidiary management and practices. Please, this particular bullet over here is very, very important. It is that bullet that we are going to expand to explain all the four different international orientations. So I'm taking it again. Every multinational enterprise adheres to a central strategic issue, but our ability to differentiate one strategic orientation from the other resides on the degree of domination of the multinational enterprise's headquarters over the subsidiary management and HR practices. And the reverse is true. So as we move from one of these concepts to the other, you realize that in some of them, the headquarters play key role beyond the headquarters, even at the subsidiary level. So when it comes to recruitment and selection, or the occupation of key managerial positions, it is still dictated by the headquarters. In other orientations, we realize that the headquarters has relaxed and given much autonomy or control to these subsidiaries or the local nationals to manage their affairs. So that is what we mean by degree of domination of the multinational enterprise headquarters over the subsidiary management and HR practices. Anyway, one thing here, yeah, the whole question to what you will dribble, but still you will not be able to articulate it properly. So please pay keen attention. So thus, this headquarters orientation goes a long way towards determining the level of autonomy that subsidiaries enjoy in their management and HR practices. So it's more or less like a continuum. The more the headquarters has an autonomy, then it is becoming more ethnocentric. But the less they have autonomy, then it's becoming more polycentric. So let's take them one by one. Ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism. The initial orientation of most managers in multinational enterprise headquarters, especially those from relatively homogeneous national populations and culture, is one of ethnocentrism. And in this orientation, managers are most likely to use a home country standard as a reference in managing international activities. So when we say managers are likely to use home country standard, it means that they are more inclined to implement directives and standards that maintain at the headquarters, the country where the headquarters is found. So the norms and procedures that are perceived to be best practices by the headquarters and the country where the headquarters is located is what is going to be replicated across all their subsidiaries. So the outlook is one of centralized decision-making and high control over international operations that are centered in the headquarters. Everything you will be doing, you have to get the consent and approval from headquarters. And when I mean headquarters, the country where the headquarters is located. Managers with such mindsets are likely to follow an international strategy of replicating home country systems, procedures, and structures abroad. And this mindset is likely to make extensive use of expatriates from headquarters to establish and manage the subsidiary operations. All right. It's plenty English, but what does this mean? When we say ethnocentrism, it is an approach where the home country's norms, practices, and policies are considered superior to that of the host country. For that matter, they are applied in the foreign subsidiaries. Key positions. So the implication of this ethnocentrism is that key positions such as general manager, CEO, particularly top-level management, in the subsidiaries are typically filled by nationals from the headquarters or the nationals. So when I say nationals from the headquarters, I'm referring to parent country nationals. Now, let me give you an example. A US-based company expanding into Brazil, for instance, may send American managers to lead its Brazilian subsidiary. And these managers will also end up applying the US management style, HR policies, and corporate culture, potentially disregarding the local practices and laws in Brazil. So that is a classical example of ethnocentrism. Now let's go to polycentrism. Polycentrism is an approach where each subsidiary is managed as a distinct, autonomous entity with local practices and policies. Now, the implication is that key policies in subsidiaries are often filled by local nationals, that is, the host country nationals. And the local culture and business practices are given priority over what maintains in the parent country. So please, when I was explaining the ethnocentrism, I indicated that key positions are filled by parent country nationals. I didn't say it for the fun of it. I know why I'm saying this. Now, when I'm explaining polycentrism, I'm saying that key positions are filled by local nationals. And by that, I mean host country nationals. Okay. Over time, as a result of increased experience, managerial orientations tend to evolve to develop into either polycentrism or regiocentrism. So there's a thin line between polycentrism and regiocentrism, and we'll be considering that of regiocentrism soon. But in a nutshell, polycentrism okay, let me give an example of polycentrism so that it will become clearer. An example of polycentrism is that a German, let's say a German automobile manufacturer with plants in India hires Indian managers and staff to run its operations there. Now, in this scenario, the company, this German company, will allow the Indian subsidiary to follow local HR practices, labor law, management style, to better align with the local market and culture. So that would be a typical example of polycentrism, whereby autonomy and decision control resides within the purview of the host country and its nationals. Regiocentrism. So whenever an extension is made to include a number of similar countries in a given region with host country standards and practices being increasingly used as a reference point for managing a company's operations, then we are talking about regiocentrism. What does it mean? So regiocentrism can be explained as an approach where subsidiaries are grouped into regions. You can also use the term that these subsidiaries can be clustered on regional basis. And the strategies that prevail within that sub-region are either adopted or developed because of the similarities within the region. Now, the implication of regiocentrism is that key positions may be filled by individuals from within the region. So here we are talking about third country nationals. Let me give you an example of regiocentrism. So let's say, but before I come to the example, regiocentrism can function along these lines. When you pick Africa, you can divide it into West Africa, East Africa, North Africa, and then South Africa, right? Assuming the operations of a multinational enterprise has its footprints within the West African sub-region, then they may decide to develop policies and practices that are more suitable in managing human resources in this sub-region. If this is the orientation, then we are talking about regiocentrism, because the orientation here is to have HR policies, procedures, and standards that are friendly to a given region. Is it clear? So now let me come to the example of a regiocentrism orientation. So let's say an European cosmetics company with subsidiaries in various Asian countries adopts a regional approach for its Asian operations. And it goes forth to appoint a regional manager from Singapore to oversee operations in Japan, China, and India, and go ahead to also develop strategies that are tailor-made to the Asian market while ensuring some regional consistency. If this happens, then we are talking about a regiocentrism international orientation, because all that is being pursued by the multinational enterprise is to have policies, practices, procedures, and standards that are friendly to a particular region of their operation. So that is regiocentrism. Now, the next or the last thing we'll be considering is what we call geocentrism. Geocentrism. So with geocentrism, it is an international orientation where the firm is said to have reached a level of where they are operating with a global mindset. So they think they have become a global firm that needs to develop and satisfy all the issues that are coming from the global front. So geocentrism is an approach where the company adopts a global perspective and seeks to integrate a worldwide approach to its operation. And key positions are filled by best talent available, regardless of their nationality, location, and it also seeks to promote a truly global corporate culture, which is a mix of parent country nationals, host country nationals, and third country nationals. The bottom line with geocentrism is that once you are perceived to have the right competencies and skills to flourish in an organization, irrespective of your cultural orientation or the country where you are coming from, and your location in particular, they will still give you the opportunity to come and prove, to justify your inclusion. So that is geocentrism. So in geocentrism, the firm adopts a global perspective and seeks to integrate a worldwide approach to its operations. And as I indicated, key positions are filled by a mix of nationals ranging from parent country to host country. So a global firm, a firm that is using geocentrism can be a multinational tech firm like Google or Meta, the kind of Facebook. No? So when Google, for instance, employs a geocentric approach, we can discern this when they end up hiring the most qualified individuals for leadership roles from anywhere in the world. And whether the person is from the headquarters in USA or in any of the European, Asian, or African continents, once the person has what it takes to flourish on the job, the person will be given opportunity. So that is geocentrism. It looks at best practices across the globe and best talents across the globe to bring them on board. Now, under such circumstances, the company is set to promote a global corporate culture and standardizes its practices worldwide while allowing local adaptations where necessary. So we'll come back to this particular sentence. What it simply means is that when firms get to this global pedestal and they are operating with a geocentric orientation, they seek to think global by maintaining standardizations across their headquarters and subsidiaries, but they also act locally by allowing some modifications or adaptations to be made in order to appeal to the conscience, tastes, and preferences of their local customers. So that will be all for today. By way of summarizing, the 4 international orientations, if you like, the 4 approaches or theories, including ethnocentrism, polycentrism, regioncentrism, and geocentrism, reflects different philosophies or strategies in multinational enterprises that can be used to balance the influence of home country, host country, and global integration in managing their international operations. And depending on the one you adopt, it will have serious implications on your HR policies and practices. So when a firm endorses the ethnocentric orientation, it means that key positions in the firm will be occupied by parent country nationals. And for that matter, it shouldn't be surprising when you find them sending people from the headquarters to come and operate and occupy strategic positions in the subsidiary company. You shouldn't be surprised because they are adhering to the ethnocentric school of thought. But a different ball game altogether will ensue when the firm endorses a polycentric orientation, wherein the implication is that key positions will be open to individuals in the host country to occupy, and such people are also provided the authority and autonomy to control affairs over them. But of course, they must mutually support and not deviate from the standards that have been set by the headquarters. So that is just by the way of introducing the international orientations. Any question? Any question?
No, sir.
All right. So let me stop the recording.